We're running ahead of schedule. This is perfect. So you're going to hear from Barbara a number of times. Of course, we all know and love the impact that she has had in the state of Massachusetts for decades. First coming here with her, at the time, young daughter Lisa, expanding her family, Luke and Ace. In fact, Barbara, when she was a young mom with Ace, made front page news of the Boston Globe for actually breastfeeding at the State House. At the time, it was controversial, so she was a rebel raiser from way back when. It's my pleasure to introduce not only the pride of Boston, but the pride of Detroit, and a classmate of Diana Ross. I know, Barbara Salisbury.
What an amazing year, the last of my 18 years as CEO at MAB. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished, but even more proud of where we're going. We're not the biggest provider of human services, but we're the most innovative and the boldest. In 1973, MAB started partnering with the state to move individuals with intellectual disabilities out of state institutions for the mentally retarded to live in the community like everybody else. And while moving people out of institutions was an amazing change, when I came to MAB in 2006, it was clear that the vision of deinstitutionalization hadn't been fully realized. It was unrealistic to think that individuals who'd spent their lives in institutions without education or training would automatically assume agency over their lives and build the kind of lives they wanted. We've come a long way since 2006. And in the last several years, MAB has put together a combination of programs that give adults with intellectual disabilities and brain injuries the skills they need to become more independent and to build the lives they want for themselves. And while we've aspired to achieve this for years, we're finally seeing the outcomes that we've always hoped and worked for. Embedding occupational therapists into the staff team in our group homes did so much to change the focus of our programs, from doing things for participants to supporting them to learn how to do things themselves. MAB's new Training and Rehabilitation Center, which has provided an ideal venue for participants to work on their rehabilitation while also participating in stimulating workshops and making friends, has proved to be a critical step in helping individuals rebuild their lives after years of living in a nursing home. And the TRC gets participants ready to work with MAB's one-to-one vocational program that will help them get a job, keep the job, and make them feel like they're back in the game. Becoming independent is different for everyone. Some of our participants love the sociability and support of living in a group home. They loathe the idea of moving to their own apartment, fearing loneliness and isolation. And as long as they feel like they're in the driver's seat, living in a group home is fine. Others, however, are eager to live on their own. For them, 24-hour staffing is stifling and demeaning. MAB's Individual Supports Case Management Program, combined with ADS's Assistive Technology Program, make living independently achievable. This year, we have impressive examples of participants who've made enormous strides in achieving independence and the satisfaction it's given them. MAB's Ivy Street School has made enormous strides this year in furthering its mission of preparing students to be full participants in society as adults. The therapeutic model, which is the foundation of the school, allows neurodiverse students to form the trusting relationships that are essential in order for them to become ready to learn new strategies that will allow them to succeed in the adult world. Over 90% of our students are passing MCAS, and an increasing portion are graduating with a job or enrollment in higher education. We measure our success by the percent of our graduates who are full participants in their community, working, living independently, and having friends. We are gratified to see our graduates thriving as adults. State law ends special education on a student's 22nd birthday. Anyone who has children knows that most aren't ready to fully launch at age 22. Young adults with serious medical and behavioral challenges fail when supports are pulled away that early and experience an endless series of hospitalizations. We are proud that the state is partnering with us on a pilot program that extends clinical support and skills training for young adults who need it in order for them to flourish in the adult world. This program, T22, is a collaboration between the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Developmental Services, the Ivy Street School, and MAB's Adult Disability Services. Through Skills for Life, Ivy Street has been able to extend the training that is so effective with our students to young adults with disabilities in the broader community. Skills for Life is growing, and with 70 participants and contracts with a growing number of local school districts, is now bigger than the school. We are delighted to demonstrate the effectiveness of the Skills for Life model by helping more individuals with disabilities achieve their full potential. At MAB, MAB's programs for individuals who are blind or visually impaired, we continue to lead in new and important ways despite a series of losses, including the untimely deaths of Kim Tebow and Edith Esterine, and the retirement of Amy Rule and Sassy Outwater Wright, all amazing leaders with impressive records of achievement. But with the hiring of Jen Harnish as Director of Social Services and other staff with the lived experience of blindness, we continue to expand our focus on services that will allow adults to be full participants in society despite their loss of vision. MAB's team of licensed clinicians provides the therapy that individuals need to adapt to this life-altering change and become ready to learn the skills that will allow them to stay in the game, preventing them from feeling helpless and socially isolated. And no one can be a full participant in society today without being able to use the internet. We continue to strengthen and expand our access technology sites throughout the state, providing one-to-one training on hardware and software designed for blind and visually impaired users. And our work with the Age-Friendly Network in Massachusetts allows us to collaborate with all organizations serving older adults in cities across the state to ensure that adults who are visually impaired are effectively supported. While investing in making our programs more effective has always been our priority, we've also made impressive investments in finance, human resources, IT, facilities, and advancement to significantly improve the ways in which these departments support our programs. We implemented a new finance and accounting system that will streamline operations and provide data that will improve our management decision-making. We automated HR operations while increasing the high-touch support that our staff need. We're increasingly using electronic applications to maximize savings and revenue. And we've developed a capital maintenance planning and reporting system to ensure that our group homes are well maintained. While there will always be much more to be done, I am proud of what we've accomplished and happy that I've had the opportunity to be part of accomplishing it.
There'll be more times for standing ovations as well. One of Barbara's genius, besides all that she accomplished, is surrounding herself with excellence. And another great achievement are the relationships that she's been able to cultivate and nurture over the last decades. Some of those might say they've been held hostage by Barbara, but many of them see her as a colleague, a confidant, mentor, role model, and friend. So when Bill Rader retired as executive director of National Braille Press, he didn't go off into the sunset. Barbara captured him and brought him on as a board of director for MAB Community Services, and specifically Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And for 16 years, he made incredible impact as a board of director. So it's my privilege and honor to introduce Michael Ellen Bogan, chair of MAB V Committee, and Bill Rader, a nice tribute to Bill.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Barbara. I want to add one other accolade. Force of nature is how I've always thought about you.
Michael's right next to you.
Hey, Bill. First time I met you a number of years ago, I thought to myself, this is a person that I can look to, that anyone can look to as a model for how to live one's life, regardless of what life throws at you. So I just want to say thank you, Bill, on behalf of MAB-V's Board of Directors and MAB's Board of Directors. Thank you for your service. Your impact has been remarkable. As the longtime executive director of the National Braille Press, you've 32 years, I believe? 32 years. You've expertly advised us on how to best manage MAB. Your guidance on how MAB can meet the needs of the blind and visually impaired participants has been invaluable. You've also carefully reviewed MAB's financial reports and asked probing questions. You've introduced MAB to potential funders. I'm sure your wife, Jean, remembers when you dragged her to Vermont to go skiing with Barbara and to connect with Frank Gibney. And today, the Gibney Foundation is one of MAB's most generous and long-standing partners. You've become a world traveler, community leader, loving husband and father, a man with many friends. Your life is a model, truly, for full and meaningful lives that MAB inspires and helps participants achieve. Thank you for everything you've done for MAB Community Services, Bill. We will miss you. Much appreciated. Thank you. On behalf of MAB, presenting you with a beautiful plaque, and thanks for your service. So you have to look just to your left a little bit. We're going to have our picture taken.
Well, let's stand closer together.
We can't get much closer together. With that, would you like to say a few words?
Okay.
And if you turn just,
What is this?
it's
Is this?
that's your plaque.
Okay. Oh,
Framed beautifully.
wow, it's huge.
It is huge. So turn 90 degrees.
Okay.
As an engineer, I know you know what that is.
Is there a microphone
There
here?
you go.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Board of Directors, and thank you, Barbara. I am honored and very pleased. I have been honored and pleased to serve on the board here for, as Mike says, 16 years. When Barbara first came to MAB, it was only a few months before I retired at National Braille Press. And when I retired, I sent out a letter to colleagues and friends, and the next day, or very soon thereafter, I felt a lasso circling my body, and at the other end of the rope was Barbara. So I came in Barbara's first year, and now I'm going out in Barbara's last year. So I've outdone Mark Twain. Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, all of you.
And one of the pictures on the plaque is a picture of Bill Rader and Hugh Herr. And Hugh Herr is the bionic man from MIT Media Lab who has the most fascinating TED Talk. And when MABV wanted to have an assistive technology summit and have Hugh Herr speak, it was Bill Rader that offered the introduction and introduced Hugh. The only person able to do that is somebody of Bill's stature. So big impacts all around. Barbara, back to you.
Can't have all these tall people talk before me. So as I said in the beginning, I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I want to be clear, we couldn't have done it on our own. We couldn't have done it without you. I want to thank the thought leaders whose ideas inspired us and charted our path for the future. Ray Kurzweil, who showed us that technological innovation would be a game changer for individuals who are visually impaired. The Center for Public Representation and Assistant Secretary Jean McGuire, whose landmark work resulted in thousands of adults moving out of nursing homes. Their work motivated us to develop a cluster of programs that realizes the vision of individuals with disabilities living full lives in the community. Ellen Cohen, Wendy Koster, and Gail Orsman, whose research at Boston University guided the development of Ivy Street's programs to help neurodiverse young adults develop the skills they need to become contributing members of society. The Institute of Community Inclusion, whose training allowed our staff to walk the talk. I want also to thank our funders, the individuals and foundations who have been the driving force behind all we've accomplished. These are the people who believed in us and gave us the resources that enabled us to move forward toward realizing our vision. The people who provided the venture capital for us to develop effective strategies that would allow people to adjust to vision loss and thrive. Scott McGrath, the Ellen Bogan family, the Memorial Foundation for the Blind, David and Sydney Feldman, the Gibney Family Foundation, Point 32 Health Foundation, the Next 50 Initiative, the Hearst Foundation, the Liberty Mutual Foundation, and the Boston Athletic Association. The people who gave us the resources that allowed us to make sure that young people with disabilities get what they need to succeed as adults. The Pratt family, Susan Whitehead, Ralph Muller, Judy Papran and Richard Anders, Steve Calhoun and Kristen Forbes, the Barbara Epstein Foundation and Louis Epstein, Allison and Craig Fannenstiel, and the Hamilton Company Charitable Foundation. And the people who invested in providing stable homes for our participants and the recognition and professional development that our staff deserve. The O'Friel family, Stephen and Suzanne Cates, Ken and Jan Cunningham, Jay Lupica, Talia Nevo-Hacohen, Stephanie Fidel and Mark Huberman, the Amello family, Jenny Netzer and Ellis Seidman, Rockland Trust, and the Miller Innovation Fund. And finally, I want to thank our partners whose efforts have allowed MAB to be a bold innovator, punching above our weight in order to be an agent of positive change. Senator Cynthia Cream, who provided the leadership necessary to get legislative support for adjustment counseling and technology training that allow visually impaired adults to thrive. Dr. Paula Johnson, president of Wellesley College, who used her enormous social capital to persuade government leaders to pilot new, more effective ways of helping young people with serious health challenges to build successful lives as adults. The School of Occupational Therapy at Boston University, whose research allowed us to work with neurodiverse young people to allow them to achieve their potential. And to Jenny Dunkley, whose tireless advocacy allowed us to build the Transition to Adulthood program, the hallmark of the Ivy Street School. Amy Bernstein at Mass Health and the DDS ABI waiver team, who collaborated with us to make sure that the state funding and regulations were aligned with MAB's strategies to achieve the outcomes that we all envisioned from the start, but that were so difficult to actually achieve. As you can see, over the past 18 years, there have been a long list of people who have helped us get where we are today. And it's a daunting task to decide on just one person to honor. But the work that Ruth Summers has done in moving MAB from aspiring to help our participants to become more independent to actually making it happen embodies the change at MAB that is most meaningful to me. Ruth, please come up to receive this honor. This is going to be a long one. So was it 5 or 6 years ago that you got your master's?
Social work one, education was
Education.
2018.
So what's that? No, 4, 5, 6. 6 years ago, Ruth had just gotten her master's in education and applied to work at the Ivy Street School. At the time, I had been very impressed with the work that Ivy Street was doing in teaching students the skills they need to transition successfully to adulthood, and asked Ruth if she'd work with me to replicate what Ivy Street was doing at Cottage Farm with young adults living in MAB's group homes. Ruth was excited about the opportunity and jumped in. Ruth's work was a great success, but what was amazing to me was what made her so successful. It was because of the relationships that Ruth developed with each participant and staff that made everyone excited to be part of the change. People hate change. And up until Ruth entered these group homes, the staff cooked all the meals, did all the shopping, cleaning, and transportation. For the participants, it was like living in a hotel. It was natural for them to resist learning how to do everything themselves and to give up this sweet deal. Derek claimed that cooking was women's work, and why should he have to do it? Toe hid in his room, fearing that if he became too independent, we'd make him move away from his friends. But Ruth developed trusting relationships with each of them, joking with them, breaking down their resistance, allowing them to experience the joy of feeling competent in knowing they were making a valuable contribution to their world. Ruth experienced resistance from the staff as well. It was quicker and easier for the staff to do everything for participants rather than hanging back and letting them do it themselves. Staff were nervous that they'd be out of a job if the participants became too independent. Ruth developed real relationships with each of the staff, and they began to feel pride in seeing the participants grow more independent, providing support when needed. Learning to make dinner gave participants the confidence that they could learn to do other things they wanted to do. The success of Ruth's work led MAB to expand Ending Hotel MAB to more group homes and ultimately changed MAB's strategic direction toward focusing on more programs that allow individuals with disabilities to gain the skills they need to become independent and assume agency over their lives. The work that Ruth did has changed the life chances of people with disabilities. It has led to the development of a series of new programs, the Training and Rehab Center, MAB Voc, the Assistive Technology Training Program, individual supports, which working together allow individuals with disabilities to live the lives they want for themselves. And now I want to ask the young adults Ruth worked with at Woodcliff, Wetherill, and Northdale to come up to present the award. Okay. Okay, but no. Where? Woodcliff? Wetherill? Come on, no. Yeah. Come on, everyone come up. Okay. 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 Okay, so when everyone's right. No, right over here. So Anthony, are you going to present her with the award? Yes. No. So Anthony, no, I want, Anthony, you present the award. No, okay, Anthony, you're. Okay. And what were you going to say to Ruth?
Congratulations, I like working with you. Moving in 2012, we work on cooking, becoming independent cooking skills, using computer, taking us to work. They do, and congratulations.
So Ruth?
Hi, I'm Ruth, and I am delighted and humbled to be here. When I was at MAB, I tried to do my part. Anything that I did or is being celebrated here was the work of many people, especially these folks and the staff who work with them. Yes, Zach. There's a cliche that is so true, that it is not as good to give someone a fish as it is to teach them to fish. This was the spirit of the Life Skills Initiative that I had the absolute honor of participating in at MAB, envisioned by Barbara. We focused on this initiative, combining skills from occupational therapy, counseling, house managers, res staff, participants to teach and enable participants to master ADLs, which we know are required for a less restrictive environment, and to move into at least supported care. Our goal was to help folks live the lives where they can flourish in the community, something that Barbara deeply believed in and committed her life and work at MAB to. In that, I would like to say again how incredibly proud I am of the participants who I was so deeply lucky to work with, as well as the residential staff who made it possible. These individuals demonstrated what happens when given an opportunity to grow, learn, choose, and persist. Other ingredients included hope and belief in themselves and the partnership of all of us. I will share with you a few brief favorite moments from my experience with these wonderful people. Ashley, you never once gave up or cooked something boring. This young woman is an innovator that taught me to not shy away from ingredients such as lemon or possibly mayo, making a dressing. Alicia, you participated every single Monday, cooked when I was not there, greeted me with a smile and a hug, and have a can-do spirit that made our time together some of my favorites, as well as all of your housemates. Tim, your movie references and your persistence. He cuts vegetables like a pro. Derek, your wit and your fake indignation that resulted in you helping anyway. Toe, your perseverance for your favorite. Your preference for your favorite meal, but you still assisting and cooking for others. Zach, your commitment to working, always with a smile. And Anthony, you, sir, are the person who I still think of when I try to cook chicken at home. And I say to myself, gosh, wow, I wish I had Anthony here. This man's spirit and positive, persistent attitude were unmatched. Able to tell you every bus schedule in Boston, he's also a go-to for transportation advice. Overall, these folks and so many others whom I got to meet at MAB might just have taught me more about the activities of daily living than I had been able to teach myself in the 28 years prior to meeting them. They model community growth, health, and may they consistently persevere and flourish. But I went to social work education because the most important thing in the world is that anyone can contribute or that anyone can contribute, is to enable those around us to have a better and more purposeful life. So a year ago, when I was completing my degree, I shared with Barbara and my father that I have learned in my many years helping settings. It is not always easy to teach people how to teach or to acquire new support skills, but it's always possible. However, it is nearly impossible to teach staff how to care and to have empathy. And yet, MAB is one of the only places where that was actually never a problem. The staff can support skill training, they care, and that makes this entire thing so much more exciting. After my 2 years of school, when I was finishing up, a huge takeaway was and is that MAB is and continues to be a crucially needed initiative that is still forward-thinking, unfortunately, but we're leading. We're ahead of the curve. I believe that MAB can truly help shape a model for long-term care options, becoming transitional, not residential, and the most supportive environment being a more full autonomous life. I do not know if anyone other than Barbara was sure when we began this project what people could do when they're encouraged to stand and deliver. Personally, I was able to do things I never thought I could because Barbara, more than any other leader, has models and continues to model a deep conviction and tenacity of someone who just will not quit when in pursuit of actualizing their own and MAB's values. It was in many ways brave of her to believe in us, all of us, as this model was piloted. For that, I would really like to thank Barbara and the board and the staff with who I was privileged to work, as well as my family who stood behind me and supported me, always, but especially when at MAB. While my life's work isn't helping, I will always be grateful for my experience at MAB. Many people in Boston and in Mass and in the country need this work. I hope the work we've done together can serve as an inspiration, don't laugh at me, beyond our organization, and ultimately could help folks in similar situations across America. I'm honored, I'm humbled, and above all else, I am really proud to have been a part of this program. I look forward to more work with MAB and to continuing to see everyone and support however possible. And thank you for the community that taught me so much. Sorry if that was long. No, it's my
And to show,
Congratulations.
oh, well, thank you, Anya. So to show as these people, move back to their seats, I want to call Lily McNamee, Anastasia, Connor Strauss, and Robbie Schneider, we'll do a snapshot of what what Ruth's work has led to.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to introduce you to the sharply dressed gentleman to my left, Mr. Robbie Schneider. Those of you that have been with MAB for many years know Robbie. Robbie was at our Ivy Street School from when he turned 13, graduated, and then moved into adult disability services. He moved into a group home, then into another group home, where he got supports from all of our staff. So Robbie, when you lived in a group home, how often were staff there?
Every hour of a day.
Who used to wake you up in the morning?
Staff, but they wanted to. Sometimes they didn't.
Who used to shop for you?
The staff.
Who gave you meds?
The staff.
Who held your money?
The staff.
I think we get the picture. And about a year ago, Robbie turned to his team and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I know all these things. I know everything. I can be on my own. So in true MAB fashion, we came together with a pilot program. So Lily, who you also see here, case manager, Robbie transitioned into less than 24-hour support. So Robbie, right now, how often do you have staff in your house?
About 1 to 3 times a week.
Who grocery shops for you?
Me.
Who cooks your food?
Me.
Who woke you up this morning?
Me.
Who gives you meds?
Me.
So, Robbie, what's the most important thing that you learned this year?
To take my own meds.
And why do you think this was so important that we did this with you this year? What do you enjoy about living by yourself?
The freedom.
Thank you.
Good job.
And a little fun fact about Robbie, he makes the best birdhouses. So if you need a birdhouse, and Ashley's a tremendous artist. Perhaps later, all right, Robbie? All right, so tonight's annual meeting is special. Obviously, we're talking about a change in leadership at MAB. Barbara Salisbury has been the CEO, leader of MAB for 18 years. But beginning January 1 of 2025, Mike Panicola will become MAB's new CEO. So we thought it appropriate to look at what's in MAB's future. How will changes in technology, culture, medicine, and demographics change the challenges and opportunities facing individuals living with disabilities? And how should organizations like MAB prepare to address these challenges and opportunities? So I'm going to introduce a number of people. First of all, it's my pleasure to introduce MAB Board of Director Dr. Randy Cohen, who is going to be moderating a panel discussion on the future of disability. Randy is a financial economist and senior lecturer of entrepreneurial management in the finance unit at Harvard Business School. He's wicked smart. He previously held positions as associate professor at HBS and visiting associate professor at MIT Sloan. Randy is creator, or I should say co-creator, and host of Dangerous Vision, the award-winning podcast. One of the truly honors of my time at MAB was getting the opportunity to partner with Randy, go over once a week to HBS in his office, and we would record, and he would talk for hours and hours and hours with fascinating guests. And I got to edit that down to 47 minutes. So, Randy Cohen, and now we also have tremendous panelists. First of all is Jennifer Lee Ramhoras. Jennifer is a research associate at the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy at the Heller School at Brandeis University. She works with the National Research Center for Parents with Disabilities and the National Center for Disability and Pregnancy Research. She is passionate about intersectionality, disability justice, and uplifting the voices of all people living with disabilities. The motto, "Nothing about us without us," has shaped her work as a manager, advocate, and researcher. And next, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Mona Minkara. What's up, Mona? How are you? Awesome. I'm happy to have you here. Dr. Minkara is the assistant professor in the Department of Bioengineering at Northeastern University. She is blind and actively advocates for blind and partially sighted scientists and engineers, another wicked smart person. Mona is a creator and star of everyone's favorite YouTube series, Planes, Trains, and Canes, or PTC, in which she travels alone in cities around the globe and testing the accessibility of transportation for blind and visually impaired people. In fact, she was featured last year at Vinfen's Film Festival and got a standing ovation. She's awesome. MAB is proud to sponsor PTC. And finally, Dr. Simoni is a licensed speech-language pathologist in Massachusetts. He earned his doctoral degree in rehabilitation sciences from Mass General Hospital's Institute of Health Professions. What's up? PJ also is the vice president of assistive technology and allied health at the May Institute, a national organization that provides services and support to people with disabilities. He is an expert in using assistive technology to help people with disabilities live as independently as possible. All right, you guys are all mic'd up and ready to go.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, David. It's great to have everybody here today to talk about where we stand with regard to disability, where we're and technology, and where we're headed, and what MAB can do better. But before we start, I just want to say this to David. You didn't have to edit those conversations down, and I strongly recommend you release the full, raw, uncut versions the audience is out there. They're all super frustrated. They're like, wait, what did I miss? So, including speaking to Mona. Okay, so let's start with this question. I want to start with a question which is essentially about where we are in terms of disability in society, right? And I guess I want to, before I turn to you guys to give answers, I want to frame it by saying that sometimes I'm frustrated when I read the news and follow the public policy debate, in that it feels like the people who want to make a difference in the world feel that in order to motivate society to keep trying to make a difference in the world, they can never say anything got better, right? They have to just kind of focus on, oh my gosh, it's so terrible, we have so much work to do to make things better. But I think that it's the nature of history that things often do get better while we still have a lot of work to do. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is maybe if each person were to throw out one thing that they think has really changed for the better in terms of how society works with regard to disability, and then one thing where you sort of say, where we have to go, where there needs to be huge improvement, that's something that's particularly dear to your heart or that you just think is especially important. And so, Jennifer, you want to start us off?
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. I mentioned that I didn't provide my image description. I am an African-American, brown-skinned, short-statured woman, and I am pleased to be sitting before you all this evening. Thank you to Barbara at MAB for the invitation to be here. In regards to the question, I think in connection to the landscape and the lives of persons with disabilities, I think it's important to say that I am a post-ADA generation person, and so I don't know my life without the ADA. And many, like myself, have lived their lives rooted in community. But I think it's important to recognize that the right to independent living is fragile. Many persons with disabilities fight every day to preserve and protect their right to independent living. And preserving access to home and community-based services is vital and important to preserving their right to maintain their connection to their communities, their families, and their friends. So I think while I would say that the landscape has improved by offering opportunity for persons with disabilities to age in place and in the community, given the expansion of home and community-based services, I would say that there's more work to be done to ensure that that right isn't stripped away. As an advocate within the independent living services, I watch the real threats to independent living. The stresses placed on direct care workers, inaccessible housing, inaccessible built environment and communities, and how that contributed to isolation, and how that contributed to making the lives of persons with disabilities while living in the community harder. So I would say that all of us in our quest, and part of this conversation today, is discussing what happens next and what will the future look like. But in order to do that, we must first recognize where we came from, but also the barriers that continue to exist. I'll lend the floor to my other panelists to also speak to this question as well.
Nice. Terrific. Mona, you want to share some thoughts on each side of the coin?
Sure, yes. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My visual description, I'm not really sure. I can tell you, I don't know the color of I'm wearing a dress that's kind of like a fake leather situation. I'm of Middle Eastern descent, and I wear a headscarf. I wear a hijab. So what I can speak to, I myself am a scientist. I'm like locked up in my office all day in the proverbial ivory tower, even though the building I'm in is not actually ivory. But I can speak to my personal experience. So you asked us, Randy, what has changed? What is kind of an improvement and what more needs to happen? And from a scientist perspective, when I was young, this is something I can speak to throughout my life. This is anecdotal. When I was young, it was almost near impossible. All I heard over and over again is a blind person should never be a scientist, right? And it was something that was just mainstream thinking. It was actually within the scientific community that, science is observable. Observable is through eyesight. right? You've all heard this probably without even realizing it. It was given to you linguistically even. And throughout my life, like I actually got to grow and follow my passion as a scientist. And now the culture is shifting. We are seeing a change. I'm not the only blind scientist. There are a few of us, and the community is growing, which is really fantastic. Do we have a lot of work to do? Do we need to work on making science accessible and kind of allowing for blind individuals to enter that field? 100%. But the change is, it's actually starting to happen. People are heeding the possibility that perhaps science is not just observable through the eyesight, that science can be observed through multisensorial means. So that's my take on it.
I got to ask a quick follow-up, which is, you seem like the kind of person who might have, when somebody said, well, I don't think blind people should be scientists, said, well, what do you want me to do? Like Formula One driver? Like what do you have in mind? What's the job that you think is like an awesome job for blind people? Did anybody have good answers? Like if you're really smart and you're blind, you should be X?
I feel like writer, lawyer.
Lawyer,
maybe?
interesting. It's funny, I've gotten to know a blind lawyer recently, got introduced to, and he just started a firm, and he's an amazing, amazing person, just graduated Harvard Law School.
Which is amazing.
But it's a struggle.
I'm not putting down lawyers, badass.
I want to be clear.
Really awesome.
And he's saying it's a tough adaptation in that field too.
It is.
There's no easy path,
But I also wasn't taught. I wasn't taught Braille.
Yeah.
I learned Braille as an adult, even though I've been blind since I was a kid. So I'm like, what do you expect me to do? I don't think they really had an answer. Would be the true answer to your question.
If you read the fantastic old novel Shogun, which of course they just did a TV series of, which I didn't watch because there was lots of Japanese with subtitles, which I can't see. But in the novel, there's a thing where there's a blind character, and what they say is in Japan in the 1600s, nobody was allowed to be a masseur or masseuse except blind people because they held that job out. Because they said, well, that's a job you can do blind, so we're not going to let anyone else do it. We don't have that.
And acupuncture, too. Yeah,
we don't have that.
Very fascinating, but definitely that's a shift, too, culturally around the globe.
Big change.
That's something that, my sister is working on. But anyways, yes.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents from my perspective.
All right, PJ, what do you got?
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here with these panelists. And I am a white male with a white beard and eyeglasses. And I'm wearing a sports coat I bought last week.
Cool. So cool.
So I'm going to speak from my perspective as someone who doesn't identify as disabled. So I want to say that off the bat and approach this with humility. And also as somebody who's an assistive technologist and, have been so grateful to do that work for a number of years now. It's an amazing job. So from that lens, I'm going to say one thing that's kind of really important in terms of disability is technology. And that this shift from specialized technology, and don't get me wrong, there's still great specialized technology, but to consumer technology, just think about an iPhone, right? Think about how accessible and how commonplace these pieces of technology are now. And what I think that does is a number of things. Number one, we've increased access, which is fantastic, but I also think it reduces stigma. And I think more people use assistive technology, and we all use it, whether it's a voice text or just in our day-to-day. And so through that lens, I think what that's done is kind of reduce stigma around access to assistive technology. And I think that's a real win for everybody. On the flip side of that, so I would say the negative here is that despite the knowledge that this is more accessible, that it's a human right to have access, funding, and service delivery, access to service delivery around these services is still really, really hard sometimes and looked at as a luxury. And that can't be the case. That needs to change. So those are my 2 takeaways.
Great. I'll throw in for my own part. Those are fantastic answers, and I'll just add that first of all, I'm totally with PJ on the technology. Every day I use my iPhone like pretty much like 50% of the day, I'm doing something on my phone. And honestly, I'll sometimes say I'd rather go out naked than without my iPhone. That is an exaggeration, but it is not an exaggeration to say I would rather go out without shoes than without my iPhone. I just can't do anything without it. And I think to myself, the people who designed this, how kids trade baseball cards? I traded them when I was a kid. They should have cards for the engineers who make this thing like that. Those people are heroes, right?
100%.
Superheroes. It's just incredible. And then the other thing I'll add, just staying with the positive because that's my mindset, is I think attitudes really have improved, and these guys made a bunch of good points related to it. It just seems like, if you just think about representation in media, there was a time where there'd be no disabled characters on a television show, and then you had a time when there would be a disabled character, but the whole thing was that was disabled guy or disabled gal, right? But then you started to see that there would just be a character who was the leader of the emergency room, and she walks with a cane, and no one ever says anything about it because that's not what she's all about. That's just a thing that just happens to be the case, and you just kind of accept it because that's the real world, right? We all work with people and live with people and love people who have things, and in fact, arguably, everybody's got something, it's amazing. If you walk around blind, you discover every Uber driver's got a blind brother or a blind cousin. It's amazing.
So true.
They'll tell you, people with issues are everywhere. Okay, sorry, I warned Barbara. I said, if you let me do this panel, I'm going to talk my share. It's just who I am. But I want to hear from these guys too. Let's start talking about what a difference technology can make in the future. And I want to change the order around just so everybody gets a turn to go first. Let's have PJ go first since you're a technology specialist. What's coming? When they're doing this panel in 10 or 20 years, you pick, but not 100 years, 10 or 20 years, what are they going to be saying? Oh my God, the amazing change over the last 10 or 20 years was, and pick one or two or three things.
Fantastic. I'm going to pick a couple things. The first is that the technology that's coming is going to enable health equity. I work in the field of developmental disability. The inequity in health in that field, people die from things that are very treatable. Fatal 5. People shouldn't be dying from these things. And recently, we've done a lot of work in using biometric sensors to help people who may not be able to speak and communicate that they're not feeling good and might be more susceptible to things like Fatal 5. So, and they're very precise and are predicting disease well ahead of time, allowing people to intervene early. So I think health equity is a huge one, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm wanting to do and continue to do a lot of work in that area. The other thing, I think the big thing down the road is the Internet of Things. And wow, what a difference that's made. We're talking about some of the people here, the award that was just given about independent living. The Internet of Things, the ability to have a smart oven or a sensor that connects with a tablet that somebody can navigate and live independently. And right now, it's a little, we're doing okay with it, but it's not incredibly, it's great, but there are definitely some holes. And I think 10 years from now, those types of devices, sensor-based devices, will allow people to do all sorts of ADLs and things around their homes that are going to be really, really helpful. And it's going to help people live independently. So
that's amazing. So Jennifer, before I just have to ask you, you're at the Lurie Center. Is that named for Brandeis PhD, Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the football team that consumes 30% of all my free time?
There's a possibility.
All right, we'll have to investigate this.
We should investigate it.
All right, we'll investigate. Tell me about what you're seeing in your work and what you expect to be seeing that's going to make a huge difference in people's lives.
Yeah, thank you. Important question. For those that don't know me, I was raised in Springfield, Massachusetts, so I'm from the western part of the state, and I was raised by a mother who shares my disability. I have a brittle bone disease. And because of that, I grew up in a family that was very disability positive. I grew up in a family that living independently was just a part of everyday conversation. But I say that to say that I entered into my educational career and into my professional career with the recognition that everyone doesn't come from a family like that. And so I have committed my career to preserving and protecting access to community-based services And as a qualitative researcher, I study community living outcomes amongst persons with disabilities who are persons of color. And the reason why I think this work is so important is I believe that studies have yet to effectively explore barriers and supports to HCBS for persons of color with disabilities. And what we know about equity is that we center it in models such as disability justice, then services will become equitable for all. So within the Community Living Equity Center, we take pride in being disabled researchers of color and uplifting the voices of persons of color with disabilities and their families. And in doing that, we learn things that are particularly important. One is that national data sets do not adequately capture need and utilization amongst persons of color. And it is essential for organizations such as MAB and other service providers to have that data available as they look to the future in terms of utilization, as well as assessing need of community. I also like to say that I think technology is important to this conversation because persons with disabilities are living longer, which is great. But with that means that services have to be able to meet the needs of individuals as they age, as their disability advances, as their disability shifts. And service providers have to be agile and nimble to meet folks where they are when they need services. And so because of that, it's important that the future of disability not only recognize intersectionality, but recognizes individualism. We begin to think about what matters to this person, what brings them joy. And in doing that, I am confident that service providers will be able to better accommodate persons with disabilities for living quality lives rooted in dignity. And so it goes far beyond the conversation of whether persons with disabilities are in the community and utilizing technology, and more about the conversation of, well, what does their quality of life look like? Are they able to hang out with friends? Are they able to cook the meals that they want? Are they able to eat food that's culturally relevant to their families? That's what it means to live in the community. That's what it means to live a quality life. And so I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for service providers to adopt that language amongst service delivery. And as a researcher, I'm excited to continue to uplift the voices of persons of color and persons with disabilities to share their stories and to uplift their voices so that they're rooted in recommendations that are driven by community.
You know, Jennifer, what your comments made me think of is, you know, there's a lot of talk in the disabled advocate community, and something I'm a big fan of, the principles of universal design. They say, hey, if you design a clean, uncluttered website that people with vision issues can use, it turns out everybody loves that, right? It's helpful to everybody. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you is that there is a parallel notion that if we do things to uplift the people who've been, you know, the most discriminated against and the worst treated by society, that those principles that we use are going to, you know, have very, very broad benefits.
Yes, equities for everyone.
Yeah. Mona, thoughts on technology?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So for me, what I think is going to be the biggest impact is, I concur with both of my colleagues here, but artificial intelligence. I think AI is going to really help with improving technology, making things more equitable. So let me give you an example. So how many people here use Be My Eyes? Yeah, Be My Eyes, right? Be My Eyes, Randy? Yeah. So basically, did you all use a new feature, Be My AI? So like, Be My AI, it's so amazing. You just take a picture and then AI does a phenomenal job of just describing what's in that photo. And it's personally changed my life. And I have been a user of Be My Eyes when it was just an app where it connects you to a person to describe it, and so you have to wait for the call to come through, and then a person is really nice on the other line and describes it, which is great. But now with BMI, it's as fast as just taking a photo, and it just describes what's in front of you. So I feel like AI is going to really change things, and even just for me in the past couple of years, as a professor, one of my biggest challenges as a blind bioengineering professor is access to scientific information. Like, so much of literature out there that is scientific is not accessible. We're still struggling with this. There's a huge lack right now in the tech, but with the advent of just AI, just for my life, I'm able to sift through information a lot more efficiently, effectively. It's not perfect, right? I think in the next 10 years, AI is really going to help uplift all of the different technologies out there so that we can, have access to equity. That's my 2 cents.
And Randy, what we're going to do now is we have a number of audience members who would love to ask questions of you and the panel.
Okay.
So Laura is in the audience with the microphone. If you have a question, please let us know. We have one up in the front row, Lily. Just a second. Laura will be with you in 2 seconds. There you go.
Hi, thank you very much. So my question is for Paul. So I participated in Massachusetts General Hospital Institute for Health Professions doing VR social skills. And my question to you is, is that something that you guys, that is part of your research, and you guys are going to create apps to help individuals with autism and developmental disabilities with social skills, and how to increase that to go into the public and real life situation? And also, can you help explain for people that don't know what I'm talking about?
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you for that question. That's great. I do not participate in that program. However, I believe you're talking about using virtual reality to create situations where one can practice social skills so that they don't necessarily have to do that in real time out in the world. And I think that's, I haven't looked at the research on it recently, but I would say anecdotally a great idea. We've used programs like Florio, where have you used Florio? Where they've put together some really nice curricula to address some of the more common needs. And then we've also done some work with 360 video to make very specialized modules for people that I work with who might have things like high intensity behavior. So yes, I personally do not research it, but I really think it's great and we use it. I have done some research in augmented reality, working with younger children to teach language skills and have some research out on that, which I'm really proud of. So I think great tools, both VR and AR, and I think immersive reality might be the next big thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I did therapy with VR, or therapy for VR, whatever it was called.
Fantastic.
Terrific question. Thank you so much to Lily. Any other questions? Put your hand up in the air so we can see you and so Laura can come. All right, way in the back. You got to run, Laura. Phil Donahue. Your best. For those of you who are younger than 60, Phil Donahue, God rest his soul, an icon in broadcasting.
Hi, this question is for Mona. So my question is, as you know, a Middle Eastern woman in your field and dealing with disability rights, how do you feel the kind of future in terms of intersectionality for people who might be experiencing, cultural differences and that kind of? I myself am a Middle Eastern. I come from a Middle Eastern background. I kind of am aware of the cultural differences of disability in that. Where do you see that kind of intersectionality either increasing or improving in the future, whether through technology or just in general?
Okay, that's a massive question.
Yeah, sorry.
That's an amazing question. So do you want me to answer, where do I see, how my disability is within the Middle Eastern community? Where do I see, can you clarify which portion?
Wherever you'd like to kind of go in terms of your thinking or your perspective, please feel free.
So let me just summarize a little bit. I am a woman in a male-dominated field. I am blind, and I don't know anybody who is also blind and doing bioengineering research in my field. Okay, and on top of that, I am Arab. So there's a lot of I'm walking around with a lot of my identities, and it's so much to unpack. What's fascinating, because this is such a big question. I'm gonna share that I think what's fascinating to me is when I enter a room, my blindness is what strikes people first. And then it's like, wait, you're Arab? And then you're a woman, and like nobody else in the room is a woman. Like it's just like it's really fascinating, kind of. And everybody reacts to my different identities differently, right? Like, but I do have to say that I'm really grateful that I do have a supportive community that has been built around me. So I'll leave it at that. But that's a great question.
Yes, Jean McGuire up here, row 4. We're going to make you run the entire evening, Laura.
Not as fast as I used to be.
It's okay.
Well, I'm way not as fast as I used to be. So I'm actually asking, so as somebody that's aging into various disabilities, I still feel like, except perhaps in the blindness world, we have not captured a strategy about linking the interests of people across the lifespan with the concerns about disability. So when they're younger, we just think of them as disabled and other, and when they're older, we don't talk about it as a. So I'm still trying to think about how do we create a strategy that is A, about all of us, but B, given the demographic of a few of us in the room with gray hair, how us older folks can really build this advocacy for disability as a lens that is about equity.
It's a great point, right? Because older people have all the political power, right? Because older people are the only people who show up to vote, but so a lot more power. And look, the ADA did not get passed because they wanted to help 29-year-olds who'd had skiing accidents. It got passed because older people, had the power to say, hey, we have issues and society needs to respect us. And society did respect them because they vote. And so I think you're asking a great question. Now I'm going to turn to the panel to actually answer it.
I think you should.
I actually think that's not true. I think that younger people get out there and vote just as much as other people.
They sure should.
Thank you, Amanda. You are absolutely correct.
They sure ought to.
Yes. Jennifer, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for the question. I think it's really important. First, I would like to say I think conversations such as this one is a part of that step. Having folks across generations come together on a collective topic is important. But what I'm going to say next, I think, might surprise people, which is that folks need to acknowledge internalized ableism as they age. So that when you get older and you acquire disability, saying the word isn't painful. That's how we'll bridge those relationships. Because if folks that are aging that have disabilities view themselves as being separate from persons with disabilities, when we're all fighting for the same things, we're fighting for visibility, we're fighting for accessibility, we're fighting for representation, we're stronger together than we are apart. But I think part of that, though, is that there is a generational disconnect around how disability is viewed and thought about. And so I would encourage folks to grapple with their own disability, their own impairment, their own identity, and decide where it fits in their life, and then build community amongst folks that are empowering and also share your visionary for wanting to work towards equity and inclusion.
Wow.
And we have time for two more questions. Time for 2 more questions. We'll start with one. Do we have one? We're looking for one more question in the audience. One more question. We do have one there.
Hi.
Anastasia.
So around this room, you have a lot of providers, a lot from MAB, so direct care staff, directors, program managers. What is one piece of advice that you want us to walk out of here with?
Oh.
Can I go first? Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Somebody said something recently. I don't know who to attribute it to, but I think in the field, you guys are part of the new GDS initiative, I think, and that's great. The shift, this is my plug from an assistive technology standpoint, the shift to technology first rather than technology last, right? The way to frame it, we as providers got into the field to help, right? And so there's different ways to do that. Teach, help, or adapt. Way too often we lean on teach, and if that doesn't work, we lean on help. And we need to really start thinking about adapt first, and that needs to be part of our whole day-to-day mantra and philosophy. So that's one thing that I try to focus on as a provider.
Any other voices from the panel on that particular question?
I would just say nothing for us without us. Like, just making sure that we're part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think to echo off of that, I think it's important for organizations to not be scared to be innovative.
Yeah.
Don't be nervous about asking questions. I think that's how we will all collectively work towards equity, is by asking hard questions. Hard questions around who has had the power historically, questions around who's been sitting at the table, and then thinking about, well, who needs to be here? And then going beyond that and thinking about, well, what relationships do we have to repair in order to bridge relationship with the community? I believe if organizations are intentional around those questions, they will be eager to plant seeds to the future and will be better equipped to work towards equity collectively. I'm excited to join you all on your quest, and please feel free to seek research, as an avenue to help explore both need as well as supports. And I know at the Lurie Center, I believe we're studying a lot of topics that are of interest to you all. And so I'm excited for us all, the folks on the panel and those in the room, to be partners as we work towards equity together.
Thank you, Jennifer. And one more question in the far back.
Hi, my question is, so I'm the Director of Residential Services with MAB, and my question is, how do we bridge the gap between technology racing forward at a very fast pace and regulations that crawl at a snail's pace?
Oh, yeah.
Because in our home and community-based settings, we have to abide by the regulations. And the regulations don't always allow for the technology and the innovation that is present in the real world and in the community. We have a lot of individuals who are being referred to us who have more complex needs, and the technology exists to be able to support them, but the regulations don't always allow us to use that technology to support them.
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I mean, I feel like that's just a flaw.
Yeah.
What did you say, Mona?
I mean, I feel like that's a flaw. Like, yeah, the regulation need to keep up or be changed to be a little bit more flexible. I don't know. This is not my area, but definitely, like, that is a problem. So I concur with you.
I could say something. This is the thing that you're asking my question. It's a question I wrestle with every day as an assistive technology person. I don't know. I don't have an answer except for, I have seen some good programs come out that are really focused on, as I said, kind of technology first and being innovative and being a little bit experimental and trying to push the boundaries a little bit. I think that one possible bright light is what I said in the beginning, which is that technology is just becoming integrated. It's so accessible at this point, and for a lot of people, and so much part of our everyday lives that I have seen much faster movement in the last couple of years than I have in years. In the last couple of years, I've seen, especially in the adult space, huge push, at least in Massachusetts, pushes forward to start to integrate technology. So my hope is that we can continue to do that.
And I lied. I have one more question. Joanne Simon in the back.
I can use an iPhone.
There you go.
First of all, congratulations to MAB, because for those of us who have been in this work for decades, we never would have had a panel like this. And if we look back at our accomplishments, it's really the accomplishment of people with lived experiences, having taken the place of families. And that being said, I wanted to ask you what you saw as the role of families as we move forward in the future of disability.
I mean, I personally think the role of family is very important, but I also think family can sometimes love you a little too hard, hold you a little too tight, and so I think it's important for families to encourage persons with disabilities in their lives to be as independent as possible and to dream big. And I think it connects to what Mona was speaking to earlier around, like, from a very young age being told that she wasn't able to be a scientist. And I think far too often that conversations happen within families and happen amongst dinner tables. And so I think often we don't think about how folks may internalize those discussions. Yeah. And so I would say that I think family, and I can speak personally to my experiences, I think my family had a big role to play in the confidence that I carry as a person with lived disability experience.
I would have to agree with you too. So for me, if it weren't for my parents genuinely telling me, no, you could do whatever you want, right? Yeah. And really allowing me to dream and to follow what was my passion, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first society you're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Your family.
It starts at home.
Yeah.
Great question, Joanne. Well, please put your hands together for the amazing panel. Randy Cohen, Jennifer Lee Rebahosen, Dr. Mona Mincaro, and Paul Simoni.
Thank you.
All right, as our panelists move back to their seats, this is the tribute to Barbara Salisbury portion of the program, something that we've all been waiting for. Before we introduce our first person, we all know Barbara as the ultimate professional, somebody who leads with guts, leads with glory. She's also an incredible mom. So Ace and Lisa, stand up, wave to the audience. And Barbara's remarkable husband, Luke, who's now a new grandfather as well. I'm taking off my jacket because when I first met Barbara, she was planning her mother's celebration of life in Detroit, Michigan. So I had the opportunity to fly out for that wonderful celebration and meet Luke and Ace and Lisa. And Barbara likes to have a good time, even when mourning the loss of her mother. Lisa knows every single hot spot all across the country. So she found this little remarkable dive bar on 8 Mile Road called Baker's Piano Bar. And so we went out, we listened to great jazz music, we had fried chicken, and we had a remarkable time learning about what an incredible mother, daughter, sister, and now grandmother Barbara is. At such a young age, a grandmother. Remarkable, Barbara. So there are many people who want to pay tribute to Barbara tonight. We've selected only 80, so buckle up. No, just a few. First of all, David Feldman served as MAB's board of directors for decades, including the board president. He also chaired the board committee that selected Barbara as MAB's CEO 18 years ago. David's wife, Sydney, is one of MABV's most extraordinary leaders and committed volunteers. In fact, she is the one that decades ago created Team with a Vision, the remarkable team of blind and visually impaired marathon blind athletes. So please join me in welcoming David Feldman.
You stole half my talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here.
You stole half my talk.
Sorry.
No, sorry. I'm just kidding. I just want to take you on a little bit of a journey as to why MAB is so personal to my wife Sydney and I, and how that led to meeting Barbara Salisbury and everything that she's done. My wife Sydney and our involvement with MAB goes all the way back to 1970. We were newly married, living in Watertown, and Sydney answered a public service ad on radio for volunteer readers. She was referred to an individual by the name of Albert Gazagian, who lived with his wife and 2 young children less than 1 mile from our home. Al had been blind since 6 months old, when multiple cataract surgeries failed to give him the gift of sight, which so many of us take for granted. Sydney became his volunteer reader for 40 years, until his passing in 2010. He was one of the highest functioning blind citizens in the Commonwealth. He graduated from Harvard University, Phi Beta Kappa. He stayed on for 1 more year to obtain his master's in English. In 1951, the only job that he was able to land was as a clerk typist at John Hancock's home office. But he showed them. 40 years later, he retired as the head of corporate planning. In 1981, he asked me if I would serve on the board of directors. You all know it's tough to say no to a legend, and I'm so glad he asked. I remained on MAB's board for the next 28 years. A few years later, MAB's multiply handicapped children's program ran into financial difficulty when a number of other agencies were suddenly competing for the same students, and MAB was losing revenue from the state of Massachusetts to cover their overhead. It reached a point where they could no longer support this effort. The board made the difficult decision to hire a new executive director to manage the crisis and return MAB to a secure financial condition. They made an excellent choice by choosing Joseph Collins, a seasoned social service leader. He successfully transitioned the children's program to what we now know as the Ivy Street School for Adolescents, who had sustained brain injuries and needed to relearn and develop new skills so they could enter the workforce and be mainstreamed into society. A few years later, our connection to MAB deepened further. Again, as Sydney began working for MAB, managing the team with a vision. This was a program that combined visually impaired runners with sighted ones who guided them along the route for the Boston Marathon. The balance of MAB's team with a vision was comprised of sighted runners who could not qualify time-wise and agreed to raise a certain amount of money in exchange for being able to run the marathon. One of those runners was our middle son, Tom. And one of the volunteers for the team with a vision was Joe Collins' daughter, Maura. Boy met girl. They fell in love, they got married, and now we share 2 grandsons with Joe Collins and his wife. Now it's time to get to the topic sentence. When Joe Collins announced his retirement in 2006, the agency had returned to a financially secure position. I was the president of the board and felt a deep sense of responsibility to find a top-notch successor for the agency so that MAB could grow, continue to provide outstanding services to their clients. We formed a search committee of 4 long-standing board members, one of whom is here tonight, Linda Sharp, and Al Gazagian, who's here in spirit, and Tom Gleason, who was another president of the board, and myself. We were aided by a seasoned search consultant by the name of Catlin Donnelly, who we had hired to guide us years before when we found Joe Collins. We now needed a candidate who could take MAB to a new level of revenue, a new level of programming excellence, could assist us in recruiting board members who had the skill sets we needed, including the ability to raise money for MAB's continued growth and program development. It was also critical to find someone who possessed the capacity to create partnerships with other providers, expand the depth and breadth of our programs, and enhance MAB's impact for the clients they served. Our choice was Barbara Salisbury, who has provided that leadership skill sets and tireless work ethic that has exceeded our expectations for the last 18 years. During her tenure, MAB has increased its revenue 5-fold. Can you imagine that? 5-fold. She's worked tirelessly to improve the growth and breadth of client services that the agency delivers. Barbara Salisbury is an MVP, a superstar, and totally devoted leader, all wrapped into one. To quote one of her favorite lines, "MAB is my drug of choice." Now the torch will be passed to a new leader who will inherit a very successful enterprise. It will not be easy to follow a legend. Everyone who has worked with Barbara owes a profound debt of gratitude to our leader and honoree. Barbara, thank you for your exceptional contribution. You are a true rock star in the nonprofit world. May you enjoy good health, expanded leisure time, and along with Luke, enjoy lots of special time with your new grandson. Congratulations.
Can you give these to Barbara?
Yeah.
Next up, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Dr. Larry Summers. He is best known as an American economist, the 71st U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Director of the National Economic Council, and President Emeritus of Harvard University. Larry is the Charles W. Eliot University Professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. Please welcome Larry Summers.
In the positions you described me as having held, I've attended many, many events. I don't think I've ever been more moved than by this one. Mostly. Yes, because of you, Barbara, but also because of my daughter, Ruth. Congratulations, Ruth. Ruth was originally going to receive this award last year. Her grandmother died, and so she wasn't able to. My mother, Ruth's grandmother, taught me that what was important was not that you tried to become famous, was not that you tried to make as much money as you could, was not that you earned as many of society's merit badges as you could, but that you made a difference by making other people's lives better. And that's what Ruth is being celebrated for. And Barbara, that's what you've devoted your life to. And we are all so grateful for everything that you have done. I've spent a lot of my life near government and public service. And so I like to quote famous bits of rhetoric. And Ruth remembers that I always used to, when she was a kid, quote various things that presidents had said, including particularly Massachusetts' own John Kennedy. And John Kennedy said when he told America that we would be going to the moon, that we do this and other things, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And that is why this work of making people, helping people become independent is so important. That is why what Ruth and the other staff members did is, I believe, so very important. It wasn't easy. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always fun. It was hard. But just because it was so hard, it was so important and so satisfying when there was a success. And so this is something that I think is really very special. Barbara, I have been privileged to follow the arc of your career for a very long time. You were younger than Ruth is now when you employed Ruth's mother in the Massachusetts budget office. And to us at that time, you were this large, mythic, senior, adult figure. I have to say, Ruth, Barbara was younger than you are now, but I have to say, Ruth, I don't see you quite that way. The way I saw Barbara at that time. Because you taught Vicki and Darcy Bradbury and the others who worked for you, but I think they would have said with you some very important lessons. Not by telling them, but by showing them. You showed them that it's important never to take yourself too seriously, but that it's also important to take what you are doing very seriously because it touches the lives of a large number of people. You showed them that they call it work, but if it's right, it is also a source of immense joy and satisfaction and feeling of accomplishment. You, above all, inspired them to think that and to see that they could do more than they thought themselves capable of ever doing. And that's what you have been doing for now, what has it been? 46 years, about 46 years since you first were Vicki's employer, and I followed what you have done. You know, I come from a world that's got a lot to do with finance, and you might not think that financial words had a lot to do with what we do here. But actually, a big financial word is leverage. And what incredible leverage you have had in the way that you have caused people to be better than they thought they could be. And then they have caused other people to think that they were better and could do more than they thought they could do. And then they helped other people live more independent and full lives than they thought they ever could. It is an immensely important thing that you have done. And it is so vitally important not to help those who have it easy, but to help those who may not always have it easy. I've been incredibly fortunate in my life in almost every respect, but I remember more vividly than I remember almost anything else a moment 6 or 7 years ago when I had had a bad fall. I had ruptured both my quadricep tendons, and it was a staggering struggle for me that required assistance to make it the 9 yards from my bed at Spalding to the toilet in the bathroom of that room at Spalding. And I remember the people who helped me. I remember particularly that I was being taught to sort of locomote, to move. There was an aspiration that with my problem, I would have to be able to get upstairs. And so they were going to show me how to get upstairs. And they had me with 2 parallel bars and a step that was about 5 inches high. I was supposed to use the parallel bars to pull myself up onto the step. And I said to the person who was helping me, "Is it easier to get up or down?" She said, "It's easier to get up." I said, "That's what I thought. Suppose I can get up and I can't get down." And she looked at me with a frustrated look. I mean, she was 40 years younger than I was, and I could sort of see the young Ruth in her attitude. And she said, "Larry, there are about 5 things that can go wrong here. That's not the worst of them. And I've got a plan for all 5. So you just step right up, and this is going to be okay." It changed my life. It got me over what was as traumatic a set of moments as I've ever had. And that's the kind of work that I know is done in the conglomerate you have assembled here. MAB Adult Disability Services, Ivy Street, that incredible conglomerate, that's what it's done. And I don't think it would have happened, certainly it wouldn't have happened as well and as differently and as tremendously, but for what you did for those who were your staff and for those who were your clients. Many of them are here to say thank you to you tonight, but I know that there are many, many, many more who aren't, but they too know that you have changed their lives. Thank you for what you have done.
Thank you, Larry. And for the past 4 years, Stephanie Fidel has served as the president of MAB's board of directors. You ready, Stephanie? Are you? You want to come on up? Ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie Fidel.
Thank you, David, and lucky me for having to follow David and Larry. So people often ask me why I became so involved with MAB, and there are 2 main answers to that question. The first is that my mother had recently passed away, and she lived with macular degeneration in her last years of life. They were lonely, and they were often isolated because she did not have access to the technology or services that we offer at MAB-V. The second was that it would give me the opportunity to work with Barbara Salisbury, someone who I hadn't yet met, but someone who I had heard about for many years previous. So when Barbara asked me if I would be willing to chair the board in September of 2020, which, as you remember, was when the world was still upside down because of COVID, I said yes without hesitation. And I think there's a theme here. Why? Because Barbara asked me to do so, and it's very hard to say no to Barbara, even though I really hadn't a clue as to what it was that I had just agreed to do. But I did it anyway. Barbara, it has truly been a pleasure getting to know you and working with you over these 4 years. MAB Community Service couldn't have asked for a better CEO. And for me, as board chair, you kept your promise to me in telling me that you would help me learn about the finances, because unlike Larry Summers, numbers are not my friends. But I think we've done okay as far as I know, and is that okay? Mike Widmer, done okay. Okay, very good. You have built a dedicated, long-serving, high-performing team which is focused on realizing the full vision of deinstitutionalization for people with disabilities, where they are true participants. And I think our our awardee who gave the award to Ruth really showed you that in real time. These people have agency over their lives. How do you summarize, though, a tenure of 18 years, which is filled with "we were the first to" and all of your many accomplishments, much of which you have heard about this evening? If we had to say one, it would be that the hallmark of your tenure at MAB has been shifting our focus towards helping participants secure the skills and supports to pursue the life that they want to live. We have become an agent of change, creating bold new programs, and partnering with other organizations so that people with disabilities can thrive. Barbara, the bottom line is that there never will be another you, and your legacy is unlikely ever to be matched. So with that, are we one more person? One more person. Who is that?
John Isaacson.
No.
Yes.
Where?
She's coming up from the back. Your
Just
boss.
FYI, I have worked with John at Isaacson Miller for the last 30 years. A privilege every single day.
And before that, John began his career as the assistant to the Secretary of Human Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He served 3 governors, 5 secretaries for Human Services over 8 years, recruiting cabinet officers and commissioners, and I'm sure that's where his path crossed with the legendary Barbara Salisbury. John?
Thank you. Well, folks, this will be a little bit of memory lane. I think I met Barbara in 1974. I'm not 100% clear on that. Barbara will tell us. It was the first year of the first Michael Dukakis administration. At least half this audience wasn't alive at the moment. But it was a wonderful time full of enthusiasm in that moment. And Barbara had, at that moment, had been a social worker, is my understanding. Ralph Muller, who's here, wave at the crowd. Where's Ralph? Somewhere back there. Good, okay. So Barbara had been a social worker in the Department of Public Welfare and was on leave, but had a reputation in the department as smart. And in that moment, Michael had been elected governor. He was very nervous. I remember this vividly. And the Department of Public Welfare was in deep trouble. Had a $350 million budget deficit at the time, and nobody knew how big it was or what to do about it. So it was a kind of panic moment. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in its wisdom, appointed the man back there with the bald head, Ralph. Wave to the crowd, Ralph, because this has to do with Barbara's career. So Ralph was a youthful 28-year-old. At that stage of things, he probably hadn't managed anything more than a bicycle. But he was now in charge of a $350 million budget deficit, and that was just a deficit. And he didn't have a staff. He also had no authorization to hire anybody. He told me this afternoon. Nothing, nobody. But somebody told him there was this person on leave who was coming back who was, quote, smart. And it turned out to be true. Now, in those days, when I first showed up, I was youthful and rather scared. And Barbara was a legend. Now, she's a legend here tonight, right? You've listened to her. It's quite an extraordinary legend, a human legend and a wonderful one. But in those days, she was a swashbuckling legend. She wore a black leather jacket and high black boots. She had long black hair. She was really cute. She was also quite intimidating if you were a young, unmarried man. There was a legend about Barbara in that time. It may not be true, and she may not want to verify it, but the legend was that she roller skated through the 600 Washington Street offices. Remember, this is the Department of Public Welfare. This is an ancient, old, kind of ossified, well-meaning state bureaucracy in a giant, ancient building in the middle of the combat zone. And a brassy female who was in charge, the only person who understands the budget, aside from Ralph, is roller skating through the entire enterprise. So some of what she's done here at MAB has very deep roots, just in case you didn't get the idea. It's also worth remembering that Barbara started as a social worker, because that will obviously crop up. Now, somewhere in this story, she met Luke. Luke, you've risen, said hello to the crowd. Right. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediment. Love is not love, that when it alteration finds. Right. There you go. These are not exactly the same people, these two. One is a literary creature, best dressed in a white suit with a glass of bourbon in his hand and a book in the other. However, they are both outrageous. And that is the ally that they have been, one to another. Yes, that's right. You have it exactly right. Now, there were a few other chapters in Barbara's history. There was the moment when Michael Dukakis lost, and Barbara survived. The rest of us all got fired. I got fired, Ralph got fired, a whole lot of people in this room got fired. But Barbara did not. She survived. And then when Michael won again, bingo, she was the budget director for the whole state. Now, remember, this is a terrifying young woman. She can add and subtract. Very few people in the Commonwealth could do that. She could make projections. She could tell you the truth. It was awe-inspiring to discover. But now, the entire state budget was at her fingertips. Dangerous woman. And she was. Exceedingly nice. And thank the Lord, always interested in why the money made a difference, which is what is going to happen here as well. I see some people here who joined her who were part, as Larry said, his wife was part and parcel of that world. There were so many young people who were so smart, so clever, so committed, and so honorable in the work they did then for that government, and who have done that in their entire careers. And Barbara did the same. I don't know that the Kennedy School made a great big difference, but MAB absolutely did. I remember it in 1970s. It was wonderful, but small. It was committed to its own method. It had not moved. And as David said, it got into trouble. And Jim Collins bailed it out, but then Barbara built it. There is a wonder in bringing what is human to the work of management, and in understanding why you are committed to the life you're committed, and in bringing both intellect and power to the work. And that has always been in Barbara, whether she was young and swashbuckling, or now mature, God bless her, and firmly in charge of the wonderful work that so many people in this room have done. So congratulations to her for her legacy, to you who own the legacy and will use it for the next generation of wonder, and to all of those who have lived better for the work. Thank you.
Don't sit down, Barbara. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Salisbury.
Hopefully our program tonight has impressed you with how far we've come in the past 18 years and excited you about the challenges and opportunities that MAB will face in the future. And though money isn't everything, you can't do anything without it. In that regard, we're looking to raise $1 million for an innovation fund to honor my legacy and to continue to invest in bold strategies to continue to further our mission. And I'm happy to say that we've already raised more than half of it. I want to thank the people who've donated to this legacy fund already: Scott McGrath, Ralph Muller, Jenny Netzer and Ella Seidman, Brian Ballo and Kathy Craig, Suzanne and Stephen Cates, Jay Lupica, Cy Gottlieb, Karen Quigley, and Russ Hensel. And I'd like to encourage the rest of you to contribute generously to this fund as well. As an added incentive, one generous donor has offered to match all donations up to $100,000. At this point in my life, and I'll have to brag, I turned 80 in July. No. There's nothing that can make you feel better than a gift in your honor, a gift that expands your legacy. It's a love letter. This fund will allow my successor to move forward on all that we value about MAB. Like Vinnie Pirro used to say in the State House before he was indicted, a new leader needs a little walking around money to be effective. In closing, I want to thank my incredible board members whose leadership and support have been critical to MAB's success. They have opened more doors than I knew existed. I want to thank the families who shared their hopes and dreams with us and taught us all how to best support their loved ones. To MAB's mission-driven staff, our amazing leadership team, our direct care staff, and everyone in between, who on a day-to-day basis have more to do with us achieving our mission than I do, who make our aspirations a reality and routinely come up with ideas about how to do things better, and who don't get paid enough. And to our participants, the ultimate critics of our work, whose remarkable outcomes in becoming more independent, gaining agency over their lives, and becoming contributing members of society show us that we're on the right track. Thank you all so much for giving me an opportunity to do great things, an opportunity that has added great richness and meaning to my life. Thank you.
And while they are passing out the champagne flutes, just a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, you're all welcome to join us as the celebration for Barbara continues. We have a champagne toast in just a minute. There will be dinner, dessert, music, and if you haven't seen Barbara Salisbury dance, then you haven't lived. In the lobby, there is a guest book, so we all encourage you to sign. And Stephanie, would you like to come up to help us do a toast?
Everybody, let us all raise a glass to Barbara for many more years to come, doing what she likes, enjoying her new grandchild. You will be missed. You will never be forgotten.